Well, let's move on. Turning now to a vote on the west side of the state that is getting a lot of attention. The proposed merger of two towns, Saugatuck and Douglas. It's on the ballot in November. Our partners at Bridge Magazine have an in-depth look at this, and you can find it on our website at MiWeek.org. While this little fight is playing out along Lake Michigan, it really brings up the bigger picture of consolidation. If it can save money, why aren't more communities doing it? Does it make sense? And we hear this from the governor a lot.
Where are those two communities?
Okay, do you want me to give you a left? They're right down there. A lot of people have vacation in Saugatuck and in Douglas. It's still Michigan. It's still Michigan.
I've been to Saugatuck. It's a lovely place.
Beautiful state, and they're both, small communities, about 1,000 people.
Too many Chicago people there, but other than that, it's
Nolan, complaints.
Beaches
You've got Lake Michigan. There are no complaints. But the governor has always talked about consolidating services, and you've already got two towns that are sharing some of the services. So why aren't more communities doing this?
It's a hard thing for communities to do, to give up local identity. But you're starting to see in southeastern Michigan, out west, elsewhere, communities figuring out ways that they can put services together, share EMS, share police and fire. Share other municipal services, particularly if they're small units and they're geographically contingent. I think it's the next step you're going to see as people run out of ways. I mean, you can only cut so many people, you can only cut services so much before you're forced to be more innovative, and I think that's what the governor's been pushing people to do since he came into office. Consolidate as much as you can, save as much as you can, deliver the same service for less money.
Then why aren't we seeing more of this, Nancy?
Why don't people eat right and exercise?
Well,
I mean, people are very wedded to their community's identity, which is understandable, but we really have to get past this because the number of duplicative functions in this state, specifically in the metro area, but obviously elsewhere in the state as well, it's so wasteful. I used to cover schools in Dearborn Heights, which is a town of about 60,000 that has 4 school districts, each at that time with a superintendent making 6 figures. Okay, so why do you need 4 different school districts to serve the children of 60,000 residents? Not even 60,000 children, because that was the total population.
People are fiercely loyal to these units of government.
They are.
And they have to make a choice. Do you want to pay for that local identity, or do you want decent services? And it's particularly, as Nancy said, particularly true in school districts. You've got the same situation in Warren, St. Clair Shores. You just can't get them to put these school districts together.
And when there's been some success in some of the downriver communities that they've had collaborative services, far from a merger, but at least combining public safety functions or dispatch functions. So it seems like there's more traction to get places with specific functions being merged as opposed to the community.
Yeah,
identity.
and I think we've seen that in a lot of different places. But when it comes right down to like merging either your council, your city manager, you're getting some pushback on that. And when it's come down to a vote, the people aren't voting for it. So is it more education of how things can change, or is this just something that people won't inherently want to do?
It's when it hits them in the pocketbook, when it hits them in their quality of life. If a community can't provide the same level of services for the money you're giving them, you've got a choice to make. You can look for efficiencies, or you can pay more in taxes. I think in the end, they'll look for more efficiencies because nobody wants to pay higher taxes.
Because this situation is not going to get better. The University of Michigan's Public Policy Center had done a survey of government units earlier in this year, and even municipal governments right now that feel very stable financially and feel like they've been able to manage through the economic problems are saying that they don't expect that to continue, that they're worried about 5 years out how things are going to be. So even if you live in a community that hasn't taken a huge hit or has been able to manage through a huge hit pretty successfully, the people who are running your city are probably concerned about the future.
And in that study, it's the smaller communities that were in the most distress.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
Would suggest, and there is a point at which you can be too big to be efficient. You've got to hit that point. But it's these smaller communities, 5,000, 10,000 population or less, that are having the most trouble maintaining their services
particularly
and
when
quality of life.
Particularly when there's no business tax base there, as there are in these very small places, and the residents are bearing everything on their backs.
So maybe it's not merging the governments per se, but starting more with the services and having those conversations now before you're at the point where you have to do something.
That's where it starts, and it's a similar situation like Detroiters are facing with Belle Isle. What's your priority? To have a nice park and nice services, regardless of who provides them, or to maintain strict local control? And that's the same choice these local communities face. Does it matter if your name is on the police car door, or does it matter that that police car is there when you need it?
I thought one of the most telling things in the Bridge Magazine article about the Saugatuck-Douglas potential merger was a line at the very end when one of the residents said, "What would we call it? I don't even know what we'd call it. Saugadug? I don't like that." It's like that's the least important.
Douglas
But that's something that people think about. That they say, what will we call ourselves?
That's what I'm saying. That's the.
Saugatuck.
But that's what people are. That's the kind of thing I think that trips people up. I think it's hard for them to get to even thinking about the bigger issues because these little things kind of trip you up. Would we still be our community? What would we call ourselves?
I think you have to put it to people like that. Do you want to pay the specific amount, or do you want to keep your local identity? I think people need to see the cost and see the savings.
And is there any reason they can't keep calling themselves Saugatuck and Douglas, but just have a Saugatuck-Douglas government? I mean, of course not.
That's right.
That's the easiest fix in the whole mess.
And Nolan, we wouldn't put you in charge of making up the name. I don't think you did a good job.
No, I'm against that.
Okay. Well, you know what? It is the end of an era. Kwame Kilpatrick sentenced to prison today in the corruption scandal. We do tape a little bit earlier on in the day, so we don't have the exact number. But I want to talk in terms of this is finally it. And can we finally close the book on him and stop talking about his impact and what he's done to the region and really, I'd argue, to the state?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. And what we've heard during this whole sentencing process over the last week or two, we've been reminded again and getting new information, new revelations about the extent of the corruption and the extent of the damage that he did to the city of Detroit. And I think this is a good place to send him off. Hopefully we won't hear much from him again. He'll be in a federal pen somewhere and be done with the Kwame Kilpatrick era and try to get over the damage that was done.
Can we ever get over the damage he's done, Nancy?
Well, we have to. There's really not an option. I mean, I think we need to not forget that this is the kind of thing that can happen. I think we've kind of, maybe I'm an optimist, but I feel like we've moved into a place where this is just not acceptable anymore. I think there was a long time where this was standard operating procedure. I think one thing you have to give Dave Bean credit for was coming in and setting a tone that this sort of corruption was just not going to stand in Detroit. We've got a very aggressive U.S. attorney who's not standing, very vigilant on corruption. This is just it has to be the start of a new era for us, or else there's just no hope.
Well, it's a new era in the city of Detroit. We still got grand juries going elsewhere and looking at things.
Right.
I don't think we're done with the corruption, and that's unfortunate. But I heard someone describe this to me the other day, and in really pointed terms, says the Kwame Kilpatrick, the failure of that administration and the absolute corruption of that administration and the number of people it touched wiped out a generation of young leaders, people who he brought up with him, people who were around him, who are now tainted, and it will take years to recover. Some of them, went to jail themselves or were convicted themselves and are now gone for good in terms of public service. It just took out so many bright young people along with him.
That's a great point.
He had a big
That's
way.
a great point. That was a great point.
It's just such a waste.
Yeah, it was a waste. And I think, but finally, we've gone through the process of, we started the trial and then waiting for the verdict and now waiting for the sentencing. And now the fact that it is finally done, that we can move past this, I think is going to be a breath of fresh air for everyone.
Until he sends the next letter from prison saying that he can't do whatever it is that he needs to do because of a thing.
And occasionally, he'll want to do interviews occaally. But I mean,
but I don't think there's any interest for that anymore. Do you even really think that there's interest for that?
I hope not, and I hope that that voters, not just in Detroit but elsewhere, have learned a lesson here about doing a little better job scrutinizing the people they elect. When he ran for re-election, we didn't endorse him, and we started out our editorial that said, character matters. This guy doesn't have the character to lead a city, and I think we've got to pay attention to the character of our elected officials.
All right, we'll leave it there, and it's time now for headlines. It's time of the show. We take a look at some of the other headlines that caught our attention this week. And I saw one out of mid-Michigan in Flushing Township. Apparently, the township supervisor put out an email telling people, board members and also employees, that there is no personal talk at the township offices anymore. If you have any business to attend, you've got to attend to it.
Good efficient government.
Do not talk to employees about anything personal.
So if you read between the lines on that story, it sounds like maybe there's, I don't know, some board members who are always hanging around yapping at the employees, because there's a part in there that says, there's a part in there that says employees must report If someone comes up and talks, it sounds to me like some employees are like, guys, you got to get these people off our back. Like, we can't.
Exactly. And tell me what they said, by the way. And if it wasn't business, tell me exactly what they said. So watch what you say if you work in Flushing Township.
Row.
It's all business. Yeah. All business. All right. What'd you see, Nolan?
Well, I like the story out of Texas where the woman was driving a car on the freeway with her son, and he apparently was aggravating the heck out of her, as kids will do. And she just stopped the car and put him out and said, you know, she warned him, if you don't shut up, you're going to walk home. So she pulled over on the side of the freeway, let the kid out. And about 10 miles later, the police found him walking along the freeway. And, you know, when I heard that, I was sort of really rooting for the mom. But they arrested her because we've all been there.
You've all been there, but you can't put a kid on the side of the freeway, Nolan.
I know, but I bet next time she says, hey, shut up or I'm putting you out of this car, he shuts up.
You know what, Nolan? I am waiting for the parenting book, Nolan's Parenting Tips, to come out. I'm sure it'll be a bestseller.
This poor woman, they don't know what she went through up to that point.
Yeah, but you cannot put a child on the side of the freeway. The end. Some things you just can't do. Nancy.
I was charmed by a story about how a variety of communities around the state have a masked vigilante out there trying to right wrongs. There's Petoskey Batman. There's some other folks who are dressing up in costumes and attempting to, I don't know, be superheroes. Turns out the police don't really care for vigilante justice.
And we'll have to leave it on that one. Nancy Capper, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us for MiWeek. We'll see you next week. Take care.